What's going on, guys? I've got a 2007 Toyota Corolla here, and I'm going to use this car to point out to you a few things about the starter. So I'm going to show you the two starter fuses. I'm going to show you the location of the starter relay. And I'm also going to explain to you and show you in detail how the power goes from your battery through the fuses, through the ignition switch, through the starter relay, and finally to the starter itself. So starting here under the hood, and now is as good a time as any to just mention, you're going to want to make sure your battery connections are free of corrosion and tight. But assuming you've got that basic step covered, we're going to look here and check out this 30 amp fuse. So this little green fuse right here, this is your main fuse. And the role of that fuse is to provide power directly to your starter relay, which that starter relay in turn sends that power to your starter when you're starting the car, assuming everything's working properly. Now, if you find that this fuse is blown, feel free to use the fuse next to it. That fuse is for the amplifier. So again, this fuse right here, that's your main fuse. Check that. If it's blown, feel free to use the fuse next to it, just as a temporary fix. So now we're going to head inside the car. So I've mentioned the starter relay. I'll go ahead and point that out to you now. If you look in through here, you can catch a little glimmer of purple right between those two connectors, and that is your starter relay. Don't worry though, you don't have to remove the entire dash to get to it. I'll show you here how you can get a good view on it. If you pop down in here, we can look at the back of the fuse box. And so that purple relay right there, that is your starter relay. So you should hear that clicking if it's getting engaged. But there's also some fuses here, and I'll go ahead and point out to you an important fuse used in triggering that starter relay. This is a fuse called the AM2 fuse, and it's that 15 amp fuse right there. This provides power to the ignition switch, which, if everything's working properly, gets sent on to the starter relay when you're starting the car, and that's what actually triggers the starter relay, is receiving that power starting at that fuse. So that AM2 fuse, if it's intact, it will provide constant power to the black wire on the ignition switch. So here's your ignition switch here, and this black wire should be energized if that AM2 fuse is working properly. Now when you throw a key in here and turn it all the way to the start position, then if the ignition switch is working properly, it will pass that power on to this red wire right here. So the red wire is right next to it. So that red wire is what gets energized when you're attempting to start the car. Now, if you trace the path that red wire takes, it's going to take us back under the hood. And this is assuming you've got an automatic transmission Corolla. So that red wire is now energized. You're attempting to start the car, and the AM2 fuse is intact. The ignition switch is working. Now that red wire goes to your neutral safety switch, which is on the side of the transmission right here. And the role of this switch is to prevent you from being able to start the car unless it is in park or neutral. So that's your neutral safety switch right there. And a quick troubleshooting thing, if your car is not even attempting to crank when you're in park, try to just shift it to neutral and see if it starts then. Sometimes the contacts in here can get worn out. But that power comes in on this red wire, and if you're in park or neutral, this switch is supposed to send that power on to the black wire. And I'll give you a little hit. As far as disconnecting this part, you're supposed to be able to push in on the top of that plastic piece here to disconnect it. But I found that this plastic can get fatigued over time. Oftentimes what you have to do is just pry on the very bottom of the connector itself, like that. So go ahead and pop this out. So yeah, like I said, the ignition switch is sending power to that red wire, and the neutral safety switch here, if you're in park or neutral, is supposed to send that power on through the black wire there. I'm going to hook this back up. And now that's where things can get a little tricky. If you've got a certain model of anti-theft on your Corolla, then that wire will actually go to another relay, not the starter relay, but a relay called the starter cut relay, which actually lives up in here somewhere. This car is not equipped with that, so unfortunately I can't show you that. But there, just let it be known there is a relay up there that you may have to check out. Now, this car doesn't have it, so we've got power coming from our switch. It's going to our neutral safety switch, and then it goes to the starter relay, which is what I've pointed out to you back there. And if it's working properly, you should hear it click. Now, let's say it is working properly. The starter relay is engaging and it's sending power through it to the starter. You can see for yourself if the power is making it through. So here's the starter, and you've got a big connection right here that is threaded on. That's always energized. But the connection that actually is receiving the power from the starter relay is going to be that little connector right there. So if that wire is getting energized when you're attempting to start the car, then everything is working properly, except for the starter if it's not turning over. So long story short, if that wire is energized, this starter should be cranking. So yeah, I hope this was helpful for you guys. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions, or more importantly, if you've got any advice about troubleshooting the starter on your Toyota Corolla.